The air in the living room of the grand Tudor house in Tundra Vista was thick with the scent of wilting chrysanthemums and unexpressed grief. Just 5 feet from the closed, dark mahogany casket containing the body of Silas Thorne, his widow, Alara Thorne, received a shock more devastating than the loss itself. It happened as the last murmuring relatives filtered out, leaving Alara standing near the fireplace, clutching a tissue thin as her remaining hope. Her son, Damien Thorne, stood before her, his jaw set in a rigid line she had never seen before. Behind him, his wife, Serena, stood sentinel, arms crossed beneath the pale silk of her mourning dress, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk touching the corners of her mouth. "I said it clearly, didn't I? Get out," Damien seethed. His voice was cold, stripped of the warmth she remembered from a lifetime of lullabies and loving arguments. It was a voice of calculated cruelty. Alara blinked, the exhaustion from the last 2 weeks of nursing Silas and planning his funeral making her slow to process. "Damien, what are you talking about?" That was when the words hit. "This isn't your home anymore." The declaration was followed instantly by a sound like dry wood cracking. Damien's open hand swung across Alara's face. The impact snapped her head sideways, the force of physical expression of the emotional betrayal that had been brewing under the surface of their relationship for years. Her face burned, an immediate, stinging fire that spread across her cheekbone. She tasted copper, but she didn't move. She couldn't cry. The shock had erected an internal wall, impenetrable to tears. "I gave birth to you," Alara whispered, the sound barely audible over the ringing in her ears. "I held your hand when you cried over broken toys. I argued with the principal when they wrongly blamed you in the 5th grade. I worked double shifts to pay for your college tuition when your father's job was cut," she recounted, her voice steady despite the pain, listing the ledger of sacrifices she never expected to cash in. "I did all of it without expecting a single thank you. Now you are throwing me out." Damien couldn't meet her gaze, his eyes flickering toward the casket, then away. He was trapped between the man he was supposed to be, a grieving son, and the man his wife had helped him become, a landlord to his own mother. Alara turned, slowly, deliberately. She was not merely a disrespected mother or a grieving widow. In that moment, she was something steadier, something older, something he had underestimated. Her simple, scuffed suitcase sat near the front door, barely unpacked from her week-long stay at the hospital during Silas's final days. She pulled it toward her, her steps quiet on the restored hardwood floor they had laid down 37 years earlier. She left behind her mother's ceramic angel, her photo albums, and her favorite quilt. But she didn't leave empty-handed. She took the thick, stiff manila folder that held the house's lifeblood. As she stepped outside, the cold air of Tundra Vista slapped her face, but it was kinder than my own son's hand. Snow had begun to fall, soft, drifting flakes clinging to the folds of her black coat. She walked past the roses she and Silas had planted on their 20th anniversary and the wind chimes that sang a high, mournful tune when Damien used to return from school. No one followed her. No one tried to stop her. At the corner, sitting on a grimy bench outside a gas station, she called a taxi. A young clerk, whom she remembered baking cookies for one Christmas years ago, peered out. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked. Alara lied. "I'm fine. Just waiting for a ride." He mercifully didn't comment on the bruising that was already starting to bloom across her cheek. The motel room she rented smelled of disinfectant and sorrow. The heater worked, thankfully, and the bed was clean. Alara declined the receptionist's offers of tea and a blanket. She stared at the ceiling for hours, the sting of the slap fading, but the sting of the words, "This isn't your home anymore," remaining sharp. That house wasn't just wood and drywall, it was the physical embodiment of her life. She had paid half of it, scrubbed every inch, prayed in it and fought for it. And they had tried to toss her out like an unwanted piece of baggage. But they hadn't known everything. They hadn't known that the mortgage was not solely in Silas's name. They hadn't known that she was still the co-signer, the co-owner, the co-borrower whose name was listed right there on the deed and the loan documents. Silas had always been practical, even prophetic. In one of their last lucid conversations, he had anticipated this cruelty. "If I go first," he had rasped, his voice shaky, "don't tell Damien about the documents. Not unless he hurts you." Alara had followed his instruction to the letter. She had placed the crucial documents in safe deposit box 221 at the Tundra Vista National Bank, along with a powerful backup, Silas's supplemental will, and a letter written specifically for her. The house hadn't been a gift. It had been built brick by brick, check by check, sacrifice by sacrifice. Alara remembered 1987, the year the snow fell so heavily the heating bills nearly ruined them. When they went to the bank to sign the first mortgage papers, Silas's credit was compromised. His auto repair business had just failed. It was Alara's credit, clean and steady from a decade as a medical clerk at the local clinic, that opened the door. Her name went on the deed, securing the loan. Silas was proud but reserved about the arrangement. Yet, when they planted the first hydrangeas, he had whispered, "We built this together, you and me." They never missed a payment. They skimped on Christmas presents and patched the roof with duct tape, but the payments always went through. The bank statements, always sent in both their names, confirmed their equality. Then, in 2012, Silas became ill. The strong man who once lifted her easily now struggled to lift a mug. Medical debt mounted quickly. Silas couldn't work and Social Security was slow. Alara took on night shifts and started cleaning houses on weekends, hiding her cracked knuckles with gloves. She stretched 2 bags of groceries to cover a week. She never complained to Silas, nor to Damien, who was just starting his own life. When Damien asked why she looked so tired, she blamed it on age and smiled, letting him remain ignorant. And now, years later, he threw me out of the very house my name had helped build, Alara thought, running a finger along the bruise forming on her face. The years leading up to Silas's death had been a slow, quiet erasure of Alara's identity within her own home. Damien and Serena had walked through the halls, like kings and queens of something they didn't earn. Serena changed the curtains, repainted the living room, and remodeled the kitchen without asking Alara once. She declared it her domain. Alara had sought peace, tolerating the changes. But the disrespect intensified. A few months ago, Serena caught Alara dusting her old bookshelf. "You really should ask before touching things," Serena had stated, her tone sharp. "We're trying to keep the aesthetic consistent." It was Alara's bookshelf, built by Silas's hands. Alara retreated to her room and cried, realizing what was coming. Serena was rewriting the family narrative, and Damien allowed it. He stopped asking Alara's opinion, treating her like an unwelcome, extended guest. Alara didn't argue or wave documents around, but she kept every scrap of paper, mortgage document, payment slip, copy of the deed, all neatly filed in a manila folder. When Silas died, she moved the folder and the sealed envelope containing the supplemental will to the bank vault. They believed they were finally in control. They didn't know the house was defined not just by paint and drywall, but by names on paper, and one of those names was still powerfully hers. A week before his death, Silas called Alara into the bedroom. He was frail, his bones showing through his flannel pajamas, but his eyes were sharp. He pulled the small brown envelope from the bedside drawer. "Don't open it now," he instructed. "And don't tell Damien it exists, not unless he hurts you." "Hurt me?" Alara remembered asking gently. "I've seen how he speaks to you sometimes. The way she treats you, and he lets her," Silas said, collecting his shallow breath. "You've been too generous with your forgiveness. That's why I had the papers drafted. I had the lawyer include something just in case. If I go before you and they turn on you, I want you protected." The envelope contained a second will, a supplemental clause, notarized and legal. "If Damien ever insults, abuses, or evicts you from this home," Silas continued, his voice tight with effort, "he loses all claim. Every penny, every title, every right." Alara leaned forward, kissing his forehead. "Thank you," she said, her voice fragile. "But I hope I never have to use it." Silas died 5 days later. The funeral was quick, cold, and formal. Alara, clutching the folded flag and the knowledge of the envelope, went to the bank the next morning. A familiar clerk, Evelyn Malindo in the source, directed her to the private room where she locked away the documents, the USB drive containing scanned copies of all the financial history, and Silas's letter. She labeled the box, in case of emergency. She hoped that version of the world would never arrive. 3 days after Damien slapped her, that version had arrived. Alara returned to the bank. This time, her hands didn't shake. She took out the yellowed letter first. "To my dearest Alara," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if you're reading this because Damien did what I hope he never would, then I am sorry. But you must know this. You are not powerless. You are not invisible. This house was yours as much as mine. Your hands built it, your sacrifice paid for it. No one, especially not our son, gets to erase that." She read the final lines. "Don't let guilt keep you silent. You've spent a lifetime being the glue for this family. Let this be the moment you stop holding it together for everyone else." Below the letter lay the supplemental will, legal and ironclad. It confirmed Alara as the primary executive custodian and detailed Clause 17b. "In the event that my son Damien Thorne physically or verbally abuses my wife Alara Thorne or attempts to evict her from the family home, all inheritance rights under this will shall be null and void. The estate shall then transfer to a designated trust under Alara's sole control." Alara retrieved the USB drive and slid it into her purse. She had been quiet, but she had never been careless. Now, she would prepare the reckoning. The next morning, the sidewalks were slick with ice, but Alara walked with deliberate intent. She was no longer afraid or broken. She was done being silent for the sake of peace. By 9:05 a.m., she was seated across from Clara, Jessica in the source, a bank officer. "You'd like to terminate the automatic mortgage payments, Mrs. Thorne?" Clara asked. "Yes," Alara said firmly. "And I'd like to review the full loan file originals, if possible." Alara preempted any resistance. "I am the co-borrower. The loan is under both my late husband's name and mine. I have every right to withdraw authorization. You will find my name on every page." Clara confirmed her status. "You're correct, and you are also listed as a co-owner on the property title." Alara signed the revocation form. 10 minutes was all it took to undo what they believed was permanent. She instructed Clara to place a lock on the account. No one was to resume payments without her written consent. Back in the motel room, she connected the USB drive to her laptop. Silas had been meticulous, labeling every document. At the bottom of the file list, Alara added one more file, the recording from the night Damien slapped her. She had activated the small digital recorder out of routine, intending to note a prescription refill. Instead, it had captured everything. Damien's voice, the sound of the slap, the exact words, "This isn't your home anymore, get out." Alara uploaded the file and emailed it to Blythe Jensen, Megan Dale in the source, Silas's former attorney, with the subject line, urgent activation of Clause 17b. Within 5 minutes, Blythe called. Her voice was steady and professional. "I received your email. Clause 17b is valid. The audio recording verifies both verbal abuse and unlawful eviction as per your husband's will. Your son forfeits all inheritance rights effective immediately." Alara hung up, gazing out the window. The silence of the motel was peaceful, not the silence of being ignored, but the silence of being free. She had spent too long enduring. 48 hours later, the necessary documents were filed, and the court issued a preliminary freeze on the estate. Simultaneously, the bank processed the mortgage suspension. In the language of law and finance, Alara had become an insurmountable wall. Alara first saw the consequences of their arrogance on a phone screen. She was at the pharmacy when the clerk, a young woman who had babysat nearby twins, showed her a social media post. It was a bright, staged photo of the Tundra Vista living room, where Alara and Silas had danced on their 25th anniversary. It was now stripped bare. White and gold curtains, new flooring, a cream leather sectional. The caption read, "Fresh start, goodbye to the darkness, hello to our forever home." Darkness. That's what Serena had called her, Alara realized. The photos continued. The kitchen remodel, the expensive new mattress, the chandelier in the hallway. Finally ours, the captions boasted. Damien even appeared in a video, hanging a framed sign, "Love lives here." Not one message, not one call, not a thank you for the decades Alara had poured into those walls. They truly believed they had won. Then, exactly 31 days after Alara terminated the payments, the mail arrived. The bank, efficient as always, sent a formal default letter to the primary address on file. Default notice: Thorn residence. Due to the co-borrower's revocation of payment authorization and failure to meet scheduled obligations, the mortgage is in breach of contract. If not resolved within 15 business days, the property will be marked for foreclosure and repossession. Alara didn't need to witness it, but she imagined the scene. The envelope opened, the disbelief turning to confusion, the frantic search for a mistake, followed by the dawning horror. They had assumed she was toothless. But she was the signature, the name beside their dream. And now, the reason it was unraveling. Damien called that evening, his name appearing on her phone for the first time in over a month. Alara considered letting it ring, but she needed to hear his confusion. She answered. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse, small. I don't understand. We got this letter about the house. Something about foreclosure. What's going on?" Silence. Did you do something to the payments?" he choked out. "Yeah," Alara answered slowly. "Why?" His voice cracked. "Why would you do that? We're going to lose the house." Alara remained silent. "Mom, please," he continued, and now he was crying, the heavy, uneven breath of a man who realized he was fallible. "We didn't mean it." Emotions were high after Dad's funeral. "We weren't thinking." "You weren't thinking." The age-old excuse used to erase a deliberate choice. "Please," he whispered. "We can fix this. Just tell the bank it was a mistake. Reinstate the payments. We can figure something out." "I can't," Alara said simply. "But it's your house too." "No," Alara interrupted, her voice clear as glass. "You told me it wasn't, remember?" She didn't wait for a reply. She pressed the red button, ended the call, and blocked his number. There was no satisfaction in hurting him, only peace in protecting herself. They had never known the rules of the game they thought they had won. Alara arrived late, intentionally, to the family meeting arranged at her sister-in-law's house, the designated neutral ground. A long table was set with coffee and lemon cookies, a pretense of civility. Damien sat at the head of the table next to Serena, whose smile was fragile and forced. When Alara opened the door, all conversation stopped. She didn't apologize or greet anyone. Her boots, wet with melting snow, clicked on the tile floor as she walked to the center of the room, set down her tote bag, and began laying out her documents. One by one, she placed them on the table. The original will, the supplemental will, the USB containing the audio recording, and a notarized copy of the mortgage agreement. She sat down across from Damien, whose eyes were wide with dread. Serena's fingers were clenched tight around her chair. Blythe Jensen, Alara's lawyer, stood up. "Thank you everyone for coming," she said, her tone calm. "I represent Mrs. Alara Thorn, widow of the late Mr. Silas Thorn. The purpose of this meeting is to formally disclose the legal updates pertaining to the estate of Mr. Thorn." Damien immediately tried to interrupt, but Blythe calmly held up a hand. "Please allow me to finish." Blythe picked up the supplemental will. "This document, signed and notarized in 2020, includes a clause 17b, that specifically states should the heir, Damien Thorn, engage in any verbal abuse, physical harm, or forceful eviction of Mrs. Alara Thorn, all inheritance rights shall be immediately revoked." Gasps filled the room. A cousin whispered, "Eviction." Blythe nodded. "We have submitted audio evidence of Mr. Damien Thorn stating, 'This isn't your home anymore, get out.' This occurred within hours of Mr. Thorn's funeral." Damien jumped up, knocking his chair over. "That was taken out of context." Blythe calmly produced a small speaker and pressed play. Damien's voice filled the silent room, loud, clear, and undeniable. This isn't your home anymore, get out. Then the distinct, sickening sound of the slap. Then silence. The room was frozen. Damien looked as though he had been punched in the gut. Alara remained quiet, letting the truth speak for itself. Blythe paused the recording. As a result, under the legally binding terms of this will, Mr. Thorne forfeits all claim to the estate. Full ownership of assets, including the family home in Tundra Vista, is transferred to Mrs. Alara Thorne. Damien sank back into his chair, trembling. "Mom, please," he whispered. "I was grieving. I was upset. You know me, you know I wouldn't." "You did," Alara interrupted. Her voice was soft, measured, and unshakable. "You did it in front of your wife, in front of your father's body. You didn't stop there. You changed the locks, you posted pictures of my kitchen calling it your forever home. You knew what you were doing." When Damien buried his face in his hands, defeated, murmuring, "I'm going to lose everything," Alara leaned forward just slightly. "You already did," she said. "I'm your son," he pleaded, his eyes red and wet. "I was your mother," she replied. "And you treated me like a tenant." Alara stood, gathering her documents back into the tote bag. No one dared stop her. She turned back only once. "I didn't come here for revenge," she said, her voice echoing the quiet strength she had found. "I came here with the truth. What you do with it next is up to you." It was raining heavily when they came to the small apartment Alara had rented. The knock was timid, 3 soft taps, followed by hesitation. Alara opened the door slowly. Damien stood in the hallway, soaked, his shoulders hunched. Serena was a step behind him, eyes red-rimmed. Damien looked years older than a month should have made him. "Mom," he started, his voice cracking. "I didn't know where else to go. They said the house, the foreclosure. I tried to stop it, but they said I wasn't authorized, that I had no standing." "You don't," Alara stated flatly. He fell to his knees on the threadbare carpet. "Please, Mom, I'm sorry. We're sorry." Serena bowed her head but remained standing, clutching her purse tight, looking cornered by consequences. "I made a mistake," Damien whispered. "We both did. We let our pride get in the way. We were cruel and we were wrong. Please, Mom, if you could just talk to the bank. Reinstate the mortgage. We'll make it right." Alara opened the door wider, letting the light spill onto the miserable figures. She didn't invite them in. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document in a clear sleeve. "This," she said, handing it to Damien, "is the deed transfer. As of yesterday, the house is no longer mine." Damien blinked, confused. "What?" "I sold it," Alara confirmed. "To who?" Serena demanded, panic sharp in her voice. "To the Elder Protection Foundation," Alara replied. "They'll convert it into a transitional home for senior women who've been displaced. Women like me." Damien's mouth opened, no sound emerging. "You sold it? But it was our home." "No," Alara corrected, her voice resolute. "It was never yours. It was built by me and your father, paid for by my sweat, my second jobs, my silence. You lived in it, you used it, but it wasn't yours. That was a mistake, okay? We got carried away. You could have talked to us." Serena finally burst out. "I tried," Alara said. "Every time I was dismissed at dinner, every time you rolled your eyes when I spoke, every time you walked past me like I was furniture, I spoke plenty. You just didn't listen." Damien wept openly on the floor, his shoulders shaking. "I don't want your apology," Alara told him. "I want your understanding. I forgive you," she said, looking at the boy he once was, "but I won't fix this for you." As she turned to step back inside, she said one last thing. "I didn't keep the house. I kept my peace." Then, she closed the door and locked it, not to keep people out, but to keep the hard-won peace in. Alara used a portion of the sale proceeds to buy a small, sturdy cabin by Willow Creek Lake. It wasn't fancy, just 4 strong walls, a wood stove, and a view that made the surrounding silence feel like music. The first morning she woke there, she stood barefoot on the porch, a mug of coffee warming her hands, watching the mist rise off the water. There was no slamming door, no passive-aggressive comments, no need to justify her existence. Just her, the trees, and a sky so wide it made the past feel impossibly small. She unpacked slowly. She brought only what mattered. A photo of Silas, a crocheted blanket she made during his treatment, the file folder detailing her life's work, and the small black digital recorder. It had captured the moment they tried to erase her. Now it would help her reclaim the rest. She set up her laptop by the window and began to write, not to blame, but to remember. The hydrangeas, the roof they patched with borrowed ladders, the day Damien was born. She wrote to give herself back the years she had spent, folding myself into corners. That evening, she sent her first audio file to a platform called Grandma True Stories, her true story. In the recording, she concluded, "These days, getting older made me invisible. But age is just silence collecting power, and silence doesn't mean surrender. It means preparation. I didn't lose a home. I reclaimed a world." If you've ever been pushed out of the very life you helped build, know this. You are not alone, and you are not done. She didn't expect anyone to listen, but they did. Slowly, her silence became a choir, a community of women who had everything left to say. Alara still lives in that cabin, still wakes with the light, letting the peace linger. What she lost was made of walls. What she gained was made of truth. And truth, she knew, waits. And when it finally speaks, it just doesn't stop.